What's happening, people? I hope you're all well. So, why do people always think that the past was better? Why do people always think that the past was better? I think a lot of it is because as time goes on, people tend, as time goes on, people tend to see the past in better light, because I feel like people forget the bad things that happen as time goes on. So as time progresses and people tend to have amnesia and they tend to forget about the bad stuff that's happened in the past. And that's actually why I say to guys when a girl has broken up with them, go no contact. If you're trying to get her back, if you're trying to re-attract this person, go no contact and just let her get over the breakup. I'm not saying she's definitely going to get back with you, but as time goes on, the woman typically, not always, but typically will tend to forget about a lot of the bad stuff that happened in the relationship that was annoying her day in, day out. And then the good things that you did will start to come to light. Then she'll start to miss you. And more times than not, that will lead to her probably reaching out in some shape or form. It might not be, let's get back together, but at least, hi, how are you? How you been? What you been up to? That type of thing. So I feel like relaying that back to why do people always think that the past was better? It's because as time goes on, people tend to forget the bad stuff that happened in the past, and they tend to remember more of the good stuff that was happening in the past. And they're constantly reminded of what they're unhappy about in the present. We're all unhappy about something in the present. No one is 100% satisfied with their life. There's always, otherwise we wouldn't be trying to change things or improve things. There's always something that, you know, you might want to change, improve, or something you're unhappy about in the present moment. But it's almost like the past's problems are no longer your problems. So you think back to the past and your brain almost redirects you to the good things that happened in the past, and maybe doesn't necessarily point out the bad things that happened in the past. So I think that's a reason why people tend to look at the past with rose-tinted glasses. You know, in the 2000s, I remember in the early 2000s, people always used to talk about the 80s and the 70s like they were the golden years. And then I'm watching YouTube videos and people are talking about the 2000s, you know, 2000 to 2009 as this great era. And even going deeper into that, I've seen people talk about the 2010s as a great era, you know, the Blackberries, Facebook was more of the end of the last decade, but people were talking about Facebook, Blackberries, PS3, that type of thing. And then in the 2020s, people, you know, as I say, people were talking about the 2010s. People in the 2010s were talking about the early 2000s. And in the early 2000s, I remember people talking about the 80s and the 70s. So it tends to go on and on and on. It's even like with boxing as well. I don't remember this, but in the 90s, apparently people were talking about how great the 70s were with regards to the boxing era. You know, they were talking about how they had Muhammad Ali, Ken Norton, Joe Frazier, you know, George Foreman. And then in the 90s, they're saying, oh, this is rubbish, you know, with regards to, like, they're thinking only there was only Mike Tyson, or, you know, or even further to that, then there's a Holyfield. They're saying there's Holyfield, you know, there's Riddick Bowe, you know, the heavyweights of the 90s. Now, all of them are coming to my mind right now. Ikabuchi, you know, with regards to heavyweight boxing anyway. And then, but then people look back on the 90s as this great era, you know, Lennox Lewis, Frank Bruno, Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, Riddick Bowe, all of those heavyweights. And people now look back at the 90s and think that, wow, that was a really good era. But then people in the 90s were saying this was rubbish. Look what was going on in the 70s. And now people are saying these heavyweights are no good. You know, Anthony Joshua, Joseph Parker, Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk. You know, people are saying this is rubbish. But maybe 10 years from now, people will be saying, do you know what? These heavyweights weren't so bad. And people always seem to look back fondly, you know, at the past. People always look back at the past fondly. So, you know, boxing's boxing. And I don't know if anyone's realized this, but in boxing, especially heavyweight boxing, anything can happen. So, you know, people say Muhammad Ali was the greatest of all time, rest in peace. But would you bet your house on prime Muhammad Ali beating prime Lennox Lewis? Would you? I'm just saying, you know, maybe you would, but I certainly wouldn't. You know why? Because in boxing, anything can happen. People look back at Muhammad Ali as the greatest of all time and the greatest. He lost. Muhammad Ali lost plenty of times to worse opponents than a prime Lennox Lewis. So this is what I'm talking about. Would you bet your house on a prime George Foreman beating a prime Alexander Usyk? I definitely wouldn't. So Alexander Usyk from this era. And I would say, you know, Usyk has a very good chance of beating a prime George Foreman. I would say Alexander Usyk has a very good chance of being a prime Evander Holyfield or Mike Tyson. People, in boxing, anything can happen. And when you're talking about prime heavyweights, you just don't know. Styles make fights. There's so much that goes into it. But people will say, oh no, Usyk wouldn't have stood a chance against Muhammad Ali. I think Usyk would have a very good chance against Muhammad Ali. Even Tyson Fury. Who would you pick? A prime Tyson Fury that fought Klitschko or Evander Holyfield? I'm telling you, there's a very good chance that prime Tyson Fury beats prime Evander Holyfield. So you can laugh all you want, but I've watched enough boxing to know. You know, even with footballers, people say, "Oh, these football players or these soccer players, they wouldn't have survived in the past." I disagree in a lot of cases. Even with music, people say, "Oh, you know, the golden era of hip hop. You know, the 90s was great for hip hop." People, the lyricism in the 90s often was very simple. I know it's not just lyricism that goes into it, but the lyricism and the beats were very simple. Sometimes simplicity is king, but I'm just saying that a lot of the beats are a lot more advanced now than you would have heard in the 80s or 90s. And a lot of the lyricism is a lot more in depth and a lot more, I would say, thoughtful than the lyrics in the 80s and the 90s. Now, not in every instance. And the thing you have to remember is people look back on the 80s and the 90s hip hop as these great eras. You're not remembering the bad hip hop that was coming out back then because no one remembers that. Unless it's like a parody or it's so bad it becomes funny. If it's just bad, plain simple bad, not funny, just terrible, most people aren't going to remember it. It's not going to stick in your mind. But because you're living in the present day, if you hear a bad song, that is what you're going to remember in the present day. And you're going to be comparing that bad song to the great hip hop that you remember from the 80s and 90s. So it swings and roundabouts, people. There was bad back then, there was good back then. There's good now and there's bad now. Maybe there's more bad that you're listening to now because the internet, which means that the bad hip hop is more exposed to you. You know, there's more exposure of the bad hip hop because of the internet. Maybe that's part of it. So it's more accessible to you. But there was plenty of bad hip hop in the past. You just maybe didn't hear it. But to say, you know, the hip hop now is terrible, there's plenty of good hip hop out there. And there's even people making music in places that you're not hearing about that is probably better than a lot of what was coming out in the 80s and 90s. You just don't hear of it. So just to round off, you know, people tend to look back at the past with rose-tinted glasses and always seem to think the past is better. It seems to be a reoccurring theme. Maybe I do it as well. Maybe it's just human nature. But I think it's because as time goes on, we tend to forget the bad stuff that has happened in the past. And we tend to fixate on the problems of the present. And that makes us forget that there's actually a lot good happening in the present that we're maybe not thinking about or appreciating. Let me know what you think. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, hit the notification bell so you get a notification when I make a new video. If you appreciate my work and want to leave a donation, there's a link for that in the description. With that, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next one.